She called the cops and screamed, "Arrest him. He's stealing from HOA property." That was the first time I realized my quiet piece of land had turned into a war zone. I was standing next to a pile of freshly cut oak logs, wood I'd been collecting for 6 months from storm-damaged trees. I used to sell them to a local carpenter, and that money helped me pay my property taxes. But that morning I saw something that froze me. My gate was wide open, tire tracks all over the mud and half my logs. Gone. Before I could even take a picture, Karen, the HOA president, showed up in her shiny SUV, sunglasses on, and a fake smile that could melt plastic. "You can't store HOA property here," she said, pointing at my own land. "We confiscated the logs. You'll be billed for removal." I almost laughed, but then I saw the contractor truck behind her, with my logs loaded in the back. "Confiscated? That's theft," I said, pulling out my phone to record. She crossed her arms. "This isn't your land anymore, sir. HOA voted to annex this zone last week. You should have read the notice." I blinked. Annexed. That wasn't even legal. My land was outside HOA jurisdiction. I'd made sure of that before buying it. But she said it so confidently, like she owned the county itself. "Put that phone down," she snapped. "You're trespassing." I almost lost it. Trespassing? I built this cabin myself. Minutes later, a local cop pulled up, apparently called by Karen. He looked confused when she started shouting, "He's stealing community lumber." I handed him my deed copy right there. The officer scratched his head, saying, "Ma'am, this address isn't HOA territory." Her face turned red. "We'll see about that." That night I checked my security footage, quiet, and my stomach dropped. Her team had entered my land at 2 a.m. using a lock cutter. They spent 2 hours loading my lumber, even laughing while doing it. And the craziest part? One of the workers wore an HOA volunteer vest, like it was some official operation. I sent the footage to the county sheriff and my lawyer friend from church, James. He called me after watching the clip and said one line that stuck with me. "Buddy, this isn't a misunderstanding. That's organized theft." 2 days later, HOA doubled down. They sent me a printed letter saying I owed them $2,700 for land restoration and cleanup. They had guts. First, they stole my logs worth $38,000. Now they were billing me for it. I decided to stay calm. That's what my late father used to say. Never fight fire with fire, fight it with evidence. So I started gathering everything. Invoices, camera angles, receipts, and screenshots of Karen's texts where she bragged about removing junk wood from illegal property. The small-town gossip spread fast. Neighbors started whispering. Some even believed I had stolen their logs. The HOA meetings turned into public trials. Every time I walked past, someone muttered, "The lumber guy." Karen loved it. She smiled every time she saw me, like she was winning some invisible war. But what she didn't know was that I'd already filed a case in county court, with every shred of proof. And the twist? One of her own board members called me secretly that week. He said something that changed everything. Karen forged the HOA expansion document. "Your land was never annexed." I stopped breathing for a second. That meant every action she took, every lock cut, every stolen log, every false report, was criminal trespass. I knew this wasn't going to end with a simple apology. It was about to explode. If your property was stolen and someone tried to call you the thief, would you fight back or walk away? The moment I filed the lawsuit, silence hit the neighborhood like a storm warning. HOA meetings stopped mentioning my name. Their group chat went private. Even Karen stopped driving by my gate, which only meant one thing. She was planning something bigger. My lawyer James told me, "Stay calm, let the paperwork speak." But I couldn't. Every time I walked past the empty spot where my lumber pile once stood, it burned me inside. That wood wasn't just timber, it was 6 months of my sweat. A week later, the HOA tried a desperate move. They submitted a counterclaim saying I was the one who stole community resources. Their evidence? A blurry picture of me holding a chainsaw, taken months earlier when I was cutting dead trees on my own property. I showed the judge my permit, receipts, and the video timestamp. Karen still stood there in court, chin up, saying, "We maintain our right to regulate community areas." The judge frowned. "Mrs. Collins, this address is not within HOA jurisdiction." That was the first small victory. But Karen wasn't done. A day later, someone spray-painted thief on my wooden fence. Another morning, I found a fake eviction notice stuck to my cabin door. The signature? HOA Property Division, one which didn't even exist. James warned me, "She's trying to push you into reacting." Don't take the bait, so I didn't. Instead, I installed more cameras, hidden ones this time. And within 3 days, I caught them again. 2 HOA volunteers sneaking around my property at night with flashlights. They were trying to remove the rest of the fallen logs that I hadn't sold yet. That footage. That was the moment the entire case turned. I sent it straight to the sheriff. The next morning, officers arrived at Karen's house with a warrant to seize HOA records. She screamed at the deputies, "You can't do this. I'm the president." One of them calmly replied, "Not anymore, ma'am." Turns out the HOA funds she used to hire contractors for my property had come directly from their maintenance account, without board approval. That made it embezzlement. The local news picked it up. HOA president accused of stealing logs from private property owner. Suddenly, everyone who once whispered behind my back started apologizing. Neighbors dropped by with pies saying, "We're sorry, we didn't know." But I wasn't celebrating yet. Karen was furious, and people like her don't admit defeat easily. She tried one last card. Her lawyer filed an emergency request to dismiss my case, claiming my land ownership papers were fake. James smiled when he read it. "She's walking straight into a trap," he said. We went to court again, and this time I brought the original deed, notarized 20 years ago, signed by the county clerk. Karen's lawyer looked pale. The judge stared at her and asked, "Mrs. Collins, where did you get the document showing annexation?" She hesitated. "It was emailed to me." "By whom?" "An HOA consultant." But when the court verified the email address, it didn't exist. She had created it herself. The entire room went silent. The judge leaned forward and said, "Forgery, trespass, and theft undocumented. This case will proceed to trial." Karen broke down crying in front of everyone. "I was just trying to protect the community," she shouted. The judge replied coldly, "By breaking into a man's home?" That day, as I walked out of the courthouse, I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over, not yet. HOA lawyers had deep pockets, and Karen still had friends in the county office. James looked at me and said, "We've won the battle, not the war. Get ready. She'll try to settle this quietly." I shook my head. "No, I want every truth out in public. She stole my work, my peace, and my name. Now, she's going to answer for it." That night, sitting by the half-empty yard where my logs used to be, I couldn't help thinking, why do some people feel powerful only when they take what isn't theirs? If you were in my place, would you settle and move on? Or fight till every liar gets exposed? The trial date came faster than I expected. By then, the story had spread across town. The man who sued the HOA and might actually win. People I'd never met stopped me in grocery stores just to shake my hand. But fame wasn't what I wanted. I just wanted my peace back, and maybe a little justice. On the morning of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with James. Karen was already there, dressed like she was going to a charity gala, fake pearls and all. She avoided my eyes, but her lawyer smirked like he already knew the outcome. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. Case number 4725, Martin versus Maplewood, HOA. James stood and began calmly. "Your Honor, the HOA's claim rests entirely on a forged annexation letter and fabricated ownership map. We will prove both today." Karen's lawyer jumped up, saying, "Objection, Your Honor. We have testimony from the county planning officer confirming the annexation." That was when our surprise came in. The real county planning officer. Mr. Reynolds walked into the courtroom holding a thick folder. "Your Honor," he said, "I was subpoenaed yesterday. This," he held up the papers, "is the only legitimate map on record, and it shows Martin's land outside HOA jurisdiction. The annexation letter presented earlier is not filed in our system. In fact, the signature belongs to a retired clerk who left 6 years ago." The room gasped. Karen's lawyer's smile disappeared like smoke. Karen whispered something, but the judge interrupted sharply. "Mrs. Collins, please control yourself." Then came the video evidence, my security footage. The courtroom projector flickered, showing Karen and 2 of her board members cutting my gate chain, laughing while they loaded the logs. It was silent except for the faint sound of one of them saying, He won't notice till morning. When the lights came back on, Karen looked pale. The judge's tone turned cold. Mrs. Collins, do you deny this is you on the footage? She stammered, I was just inspecting community property. On private land? At 2 a.m.? The judge replied. I've heard enough. At that point, the trial could have ended, but fate had another twist. The HOA's treasurer, a quiet man named Brian who had barely spoken through the hearings, suddenly stood up. Your Honor, may I speak? Everyone turned. The judge nodded. Brian took a deep breath and said, Karen told us the logs were for community benches. She made us sign blank invoices. I didn't know she was selling the wood to a private contractor for cash. He looked down. I have the bank statements. You could hear the air leave the room. Even Karen's lawyer slowly sat down, realizing this wasn't a defense anymore. It was a confession from her own board. The judge sighed. We will recess for 10 minutes. Outside the courtroom, James patted my shoulder. That was it. You just won your case, but I didn't smile. Watching Karen sit there trembling and furious, I realized something. She wasn't scared of jail. She was scared of losing control. During recess, she walked up to me, her voice low but sharp. You think you've won, Martin? You'll regret this. I built this community. I am this community. I looked at her calmly. Then maybe it's time the community learns who you really are. Back inside, the judge announced the verdict. The HOA and its president, Mrs. Karen Collins, are found liable for trespass, property theft, and falsification of records, damages to be compensated at $38,000 plus legal fees. This court is adjourned. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. I looked around the room and saw her board members, silent and ashamed, realizing they'd let her lead them into ruin. Outside, the news crew was waiting. They asked how it felt to beat the HOA. I said only one line. I didn't fight to win. I fought because silence would have meant surrender. That clip went viral. Thousands of comments poured in from people across the country who'd faced the same kind of abuse. Homeowners bullied by fake authority. But as the dust settled, I got a letter that changed everything again. It was from Karen, handwritten, shaky. You think you know the truth, it read, but you don't know who gave me permission in the first place. That line haunted me for days. What did she mean by permission? Was someone above her pulling the strings all along? If the person destroying your life turned out to be just a pawn, would you stop fighting or dig deeper to find who's really behind it? For a week, that letter from Karen sat unopened on my table. Every time I looked at it, something in my gut told me the story wasn't finished. She'd written that someone had given her permission. But who could that be? The HOA board had turned against her. The county denied any annexation, and she'd already lost in court. Finally, one cold evening, I opened it. Inside was a single page. No threats, no insults, just one name. Commissioner Dale Owens. My blood ran cold. Owens was the county commissioner who'd signed my land purchase approval 20 years ago, and he was known for being very close with local HOAs. I took the letter to James. He frowned. If she's telling the truth, this runs deeper than I thought. We pulled public records, and what we found made my jaw drop. 3 months before the HOA annexed my land, Commissioner Owens had quietly approved a zoning adjustment, moving the boundary line by just 80 feet. That change technically placed a corner of my property under HOA review, but that form wasn't public. It was buried under a pile of amendments. James muttered, "This wasn't Karen's idea. She was just the hammer. Someone else swung it." It all made sense now. Why she acted so confident. Why she thought she had backup. Owens had likely promised her something in return, maybe development funding, or a cut from the sale of my land. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted exposure. So I gathered everything again. The fake annexation letter, Karen's confession, and now this zoning document. James helped me file a complaint with the state attorney's office. A month later, the investigation began. It turned out Owens had approved multiple zoning adjustments that benefited HOA board members in exchange for political donations and land gifts. Mine was just one of them. The local paper exploded with headlines. County Commissioner accused of land fraud and HOA collusion. Karen's name appeared again, but this time, as a witness cooperating with the investigation. She'd turned over emails showing Owens had instructed her to clear and claim my land. That was the final twist I never saw coming. The woman who once called me a thief became the key witness that took down the man behind it all. Months later, I stood in that same courtroom again, this time not as a victim, but as a witness. Owens sat where Karen once did, stiff, silent, and pale. The prosecutor played the email chain, showing his plan to quietly rezone private lots to expand HOA control. The verdict came fast. Guilty of fraud, abuse of authority, and falsification of records. The man who once owned half the county's decisions walked out in handcuffs. Outside the courthouse, Karen approached me. She looked different, tired, smaller somehow. "You got what you wanted," she said softly. I shook my head. "No, Karen. I got what was right." She nodded once and walked away, no fight left in her. Back home, I rebuilt the fence they'd broken months ago. The yard looked the same as before, quiet, peaceful, full of trees and life. But it felt different now. Stronger, earned. I set up a wooden sign at the gate that said, "Private land, not for sale, not for taking." A few days later, a neighbor stopped by and asked, "After everything you've been through, how do you still trust anyone?" I smiled a little. Because not everyone's a thief. Some people still believe in right and wrong. You just have to stand long enough to find them. That night, as the sun went down behind the trees, I realized something simple. Powerful people think they own the land. But they forget. Land doesn't belong to power. It belongs to those who work for it, who live on it, who defend it when no one else will. I looked at the wood pile stacked neatly by the fence. New logs, new season, same man. And maybe that's what real freedom is, and not the right to take, but the strength to protect what's yours. So tell me, if someone broke into your land, stole your hard work, and called you the thief, would you let it go? Or would you fight back like I did?